name is Dana Jewett. I live in Fairfield, California. I've been here for about almost 3 years.
My name is John Jewett. I'm the husband of Dana Jewett and father to Jaden Jewett. I enlisted in the Air Force in 1999. Married Dana just a few months after that. And then we've traveled to New Mexico, Georgia, Guam, and now here in California. My wife is a very devout, very caring, very beautiful woman as well. She's basically the foundation that holds the family together. She keeps us all going. An excellent wife. I could not have done any better.
He's just a huge help and a huge blessing to me. He's very supportive, anything I want to do. He's always right behind me, just encouraging me along the way and helping me to meet my goals that I have. Our 3-year-old, Jaden, sometimes he can be a handful, but he's a pretty well-behaved child.
He's my little man, my little bundle of joy, with an amazing amount of energy, and he always keeps us entertained. Very sharp as well.
Okay, let's go.
I fully realize right now that, the time you have with your children is probably the most important time you're ever going to have. You always hope that your son will beat the statistics or beat the odds. It takes a long time, and I don't think anyone ever fully recovers, but each day that passes, you have to get caught up in the hustle and bustle of life. And well, we still miss the kids. The pain lessens after a while.
He loves you.
Dylan was an amazing son.
Hi, baby.
Dylan always used to wear a Superman costume underneath his clothing. His rationale behind it was he wanted to be ready to leap into action anytime that danger was near.
He could turn into Superman and fly me to safety.
One of my last favorite memories of Dylan was during the period of time that we were in Guam, right before he got sick. We found a couple caves on the eastern side of the island, and I actually put him on my back and scaled down about a 12-foot cliff to show him the bottom of the cave. And he really loved that sort of stuff, to go out to explore and have fun. I kind of look at my very short term at Guam as just it was kind of like a vacation with me and him. So we really got to spend some good time together.
Hi, Nana.
We love you.
Love you.
See you in a few days.
See you in 2 days.
When he first got sick, I didn't know that he was sick. But when he said, "Mommy, can we pray for me?" He must have been in a lot of pain, but I didn't know how much pain he was in.
We'd actually noticed that Dylan was walking a little bit differently, and just something wasn't quite right with him. He started turning his feet in a little bit to walk. He started complaining of headaches and just generally feeling kind of malaise.
When we took Dylan to the emergency room, we had no idea what was going on. The whole day is really just a whirlwind. I just remember bits and pieces of it. They came down with the CAT scan result, and they told me he had hydrocephalus, which is fluid building in the brain. They wanted to do an MRI to kind of find out what was going on with the mass that they had found. Dr. Lopez came, and he told me that Dylan had something called diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma.
Diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma it's a horrible, horrible cancer. It's one that only affects little kids, and it affects the brain stem, so inevitably, it will basically steal everything about your son or daughter.
Hearing the news that Dylan was not going to survive, really, initially, you feel like, no, that's not true. There's something, there has to be something. We have, our country, once I get back to the States, we'll find something. There has to be an answer for this. Maybe this guy doesn't really know what he's talking about. Like, you just have this, I will not accept that you're telling me my child's gonna die.
My name is Michelle Monge. I am a neuro-oncologist here at Stanford and Lucille Packard Children's Hospital. I take care of children with brain tumors, and I do research to understand how and why pediatric brain tumors form and better ways to treat them. DIPG, which stands for diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma, is the second most common malignant brain tumor in children and the leading cause of death from pediatric brain tumors. It is a really devastating disease and affects approximately 200 to 400 children in the United States every year. It's particularly devastating because we just aren't very good at treating it. We haven't made any advances in therapy for DIPG in over 30 years. The median survival right now is only 9 months, and the 5-year survival is essentially nothing. DIPG has been so difficult to treat for a couple of different reasons. One reason is that we can't surgically resect the tumor. It's intrinsic to a critical part of the brain, and so we can't cut it out. Unfortunately, all of the traditional chemotherapies that have been attempted, and there is an extremely long list of drugs the medical community has tried to treat this disease, none of them work. An additional challenge has been that because we don't biopsy this tumor, there's been very little tissue available for research, and without research into the disease, into the way that it forms, and to the molecular signals that drive its growth, we can't really find new therapies with any, rational strategy.
Dana was actually supposed to have her first prenatal check that Friday, and we decided just to have it done at the hospital there my son was staying.
I think I was 15 weeks pregnant, maybe 16 weeks pregnant with our third child. I went upstairs to the maternity ward and waited for my ultrasound. The woman said, "I don't know how to tell you this, especially with what you've just told us about your son, but your baby is not compatible with life."
And found out that our third child, Judah, had anencephaly, which is where the head doesn't fully develop. So he wasn't going to live either. So that was kind of it's kind of basically a double whammy that weekend. And we just decided, we were pretty much in shock at that point.
So we also, on that ultrasound, we found out that he was a boy. And shortly after, we named him Judah. I had a really hard decision to make. Certainly, any mom would be considered normal to have an abortion, but I want to hold this baby, I want to get to know him, and I want to enjoy his life with him. If it's 5 minutes, if it's 5 years, if however long I get, I'm gonna enjoy that time with this baby.
Dana's main strength throughout it all was her faith. I like to think I had at least a little bit to do with it in supporting her, but she's very strong in her beliefs, and that, above all else, helped in just keeping her going at that time.
The way that we coped from the beginning, that I was able to go through these things, was my belief in Jesus Christ. It's the only thing I knew how to do. Was my heart is breaking so hard inside. The only thing I know how to do is praise God to get me through it, and just trust him and lean on him. I didn't have any other reaction in me. It was just to draw on the strength of the Lord.
Dylan's tumor was particularly aggressive. This is a terrible disease. The children who have less aggressive disease might live 2 years. And Dylan passed away within just a couple of months of his diagnosis, and his tumor was incredibly aggressive. It was very large by the time it was found. It was the worst of the worst.
In the midst of meeting all the doctors and all the people, we got to meet Dr. Monge. I remember asking her one time at Stanford, if this was your son, what would you do? And she goes, "Oh, that would be awful." It was just an immediate, just a true reaction.
It is incredibly difficult, particularly to give news that not only does your child have a life-threatening illness, but that there's nothing we can do that's going to change that outcome. As a physician and as a mother, it's heartbreaking. I don't think that I could walk through my day and deliver that news again and again if I didn't feel like I was actively doing something to try to find the answer.
I began to understand that she dedicated her life's work to trying to find something to help children so that parents like me and my husband don't have to hear your child is going to die, but instead have a hope.
We figured, honestly, from all the bad that has happened to it, and just for it was an incurable disease, to donate the tumor, and that's really the only good you can bring out of the situation.
I asked her about donating Dylan's tumor that first conversation.
One of the things that I found to be absolutely amazing was how quickly the Jewett family came to such a selfless place to find some silver lining in what was happening to Dylan, and to try to fight, if not for Dylan, then for other children with DIPG. It was really incredible.
Charlie was diagnosed with a DIPG April 1st of this year. Prior to the diagnosis, there was probably 2 weeks that we had concerns.
And then it suddenly got very, very bad. We knew there was something very, very serious happening here.
If Charlie did not start radiation soon, he had 2 weeks to live. And if he started radiation, that maybe he had a year, around a year. But it's disbelief when you hear it.
The shock didn't really go away, but I remember having this very, very strong sense of sadness that this was a boy who I knew was going to grow up to be an incredibly good person. And it just felt like a cruel robbery of being deprived of that, and him being deprived of an adult life.
After Dylan's death, we knew we had to prepare for yet another death, so we went about our daily lives as best as possible. Judah was born via cesarean section and lived, I think, about 26, 27 hours or so. But we got to spend all that time. I mean, friends, family all came on by, to see him, to hold him, and eventually to wish him goodbye.
Dylan's tumor donation was an enormous gift. It allowed us to establish the first cell culture of the tumor. It allowed us to start to study it in the lab. We were not sure if the strategy to harvest the tumor after death would be successful. I was able to enlist the help of a really talented scientist, Sid Mitra, who I don't think, without his great expertise in tumor culture, we would have done the harvest successfully.
Even though we started out with a good 50 to 60 cc's or mils of tumor, we ended up with not more than 1 million cells. We basically plated out these 1 million cells in about 4 or 5 different culture conditions using various growth factors, and these growth factors prevent them from dying, makes them just grow and divide. This took us at least 2 months before we realized we were getting a decent culture. And from there on, we were able to expand it.
So a lot of things work in a dish that don't work in a person, we find. And a way to sort of sort out what's really going to work in a patient is to first test it in an animal model. We use mouse models. We have been able to put the tumor cells into the mice and find that the tumor cells then form a tumor that looks exactly like the human disease. It spreads in the same way that it spreads in people. And we're able to then test drugs against human DIPG in a mouse model. There are things that work in animal models that then still don't work in people, but it's a really important first step. Having the first cell culture of this tumor and then the first animal model of the tumor allows us to start asking questions about how to treat it. We couldn't do that before. What kind of signals make this tumor grow? What makes it tick? What drives it? We're able to start to test drugs and say, does this work? Does this affect the tumor cell growth? Can we kill it in a dish? Can we kill the tumor in a mouse? Can we make the mice live longer?
Michelle and I injected these into animals. They formed tumors which actually look exactly like the human tumor. That was why we were excited about the model, that the model itself is extremely good.
And these were resources that were unavailable to the scientific community, to the world, before Dylan's donation.
Charlie has just enrolled in a study at the National Institutes of Health run by Dr. Kathy Warren, who's one of the foremost world researchers on DIPG. And although he may not himself directly benefit from it, it does also mean that we get absolutely world-class care. Somebody who knows this disease intimately and can guide us through the closing stages.
Charlie is just so much out of fun. He loves people, he loves animals. He has a deep love for animals.
It doesn't matter whether it's an insect,
A spider,
or
a dinosaur.
a lion. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's an animal, he loves it. He's an incredibly cheeky little boy, and he just he exalts in making people laugh. But he swings from being boyishly aggressive to being incredibly affectionate, and we just find he just melts us all the time.
Where is she? She's not here. She's not here.
I think what's one of the hardest with this type of diagnosis is the emotional marathon that we're going through. We would like to just collapse and grieve, but we don't know how long this journey will last, and we have to stay strong for our daughter as well.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
The daily experience is much, much more intense, and you feel you have to cram more enjoyment into every day than you would otherwise think about.
Can I help you with that? Can I help you?
He's growing into a beautiful little boy, and it seems so unnatural that we are just waiting for him to die. And our greatest fear is that he will suffer, and how to protect him from that suffering.
I started earlier this year swimming. It's a great form of exercise to help me just be out, doing something, being a part of the world. It's really easy to fall into depression, so the swimming, it gives me something to look forward to each week. I have learned not to take even one day for granted. I have to focus on the here and the now and where I am right now. Not to live in the past where I was when I was Dylan's mom, but where I am now as Jaden's mom. Just to enjoy life, to enjoy the time that I've been given here. Right after Dylan first had passed away, and when I was still on my way to having to say goodbye to Judah, I went through a time where I had a really hard time connecting with Jaden. It was really hard because I became so fearful that I could lose him too. What if he got sick and died? What if he gets in a car accident? And my instinct was to hold him so tight that he couldn't breathe. I finally came to the realization that tomorrow is going to take care of itself. Today, he's happy and healthy, and I'm happy and healthy and able to take care of him. And so I'm just going to focus on every minute I have with him. I hope that one day soon I get a call from Dr. Manger saying we found it. I think we found something that's going to work. When we first made Dylan's donation, I sort of asked her if we could stay in contact, if we could find out, what's going on with the tumor and how the research is going.
We actually went down to Stanford and we saw some of the slides or so of the brain tissue that had been implanted into the mice brains, and it was, fairly amazing, honestly.
Dylan's tumor cells was the first living specimen of a DIPG in the entire world. This research, it's imperative. I think it's huge to being able to defeat this disease.
Immunotherapy or vaccine-based therapy is one avenue of treatment that we're hopeful may be efficacious in DIPG. The EGFR V3 vaccine is particularly promising because it's something that's present on the tumor cells that isn't present on normal cells. Dr. Lee, Dr. Wong, and Dr. Mitra have shown that the EGFR V3 is present in a subset of DIPG cases.
And so instead of a vaccine that we're used to, which is sort of a preventative vaccine, like a vaccine towards polio or measles or mumps, this is actually a treatment vaccine in that you give the body something that's abnormal, that's expressed only on the brain tumor. The immune system says, wow, this is something abnormal, creates an immune response against it and fights that tumor.
In the adult glioblastoma trial, there have been some patients who have lived over 5 years that have received the vaccine. And overall, the survival rate has been increased about 40%.